An online class. I promised you, this is ethics in law enforcement. Promised you I would do a review, and here it is. Because the halo effect is essentially when a person with expertise or status in one area is given deference in all areas. An expert witness may endow a statement or conclusion with more legitimacy than it deserves. And let's talk about the arson science. The arson science started when arson investigators, using their experience with thousands of fires, confessions of suspects, and crude experiments to identify burn patterns and accelerants. We then have the science called the arson science. Originalists or strict constructionists argue that the Constitution should be implemented as written, and if any changes are to take place in rights, responsibilities, or liberties vis-a-vis the individual versus the state, the changes should take place through the political system, federal or state legislatures. Now, while ethical issues are broad social questions or policy decisions, ethical dilemmas are situations in which one person must decide what to do. Imperfect duties are moral duties that are not fully explicated or detailed. Now, in modeling, values and moral beliefs come from those whom one admires and aspires to identify with. Regarding acts of omission are termed as nonfeasance. Rendition. Well, rendition refers to kidnapping foreign nationals on foreign soil. Most noted factor in wrongful conviction seems to be an error or in eyewitness identification. Strict constructionists hold the view that an individual has no rights specified in the Constitution or have been created by some other legal source. Punishment. Punishment can be defined as an unpleasantness or pain administered by one in law enforcement authority in response to another transgression of laws or rules. Now, the idea that the system intentionally inflicts pain on offenders during their time in prison or punishment because merely depriving them of liberty is not considered sufficiently painful is the definition of penal harm. What is the consensus paradigm? The consensus paradigm is the idea that most people have similar beliefs, values, and goals, and that societal laws reflect the majority view. Ethical issues are broad social questions often concerning the government's social control mechanisms and the impact on those governed. And with regard to the authority of religious ethics, the authority of religious ethics, in particular Judeo-Christian ethics, stems from a willful and rational God. Remember this? Paper and pencil tests that measure an individual's ability to recognize and or agree with moral terms is termed as recognition tests. Perverse incentives. Well, an example of that would be collars for dollars. I think that's a good example. Officers in large police departments perceive their organization as less fair and as having less organizational justice, while officers in small and medium departments perceive higher levels of organizational justice and have more positive attitudes toward their leaders. That's an interesting fact to note. Let's talk about asset forfeiture. Asset forfeiture enabling laws were passed in the 1980s to allow federal agencies to keep the cash and property they seized if the property was a product of or used in a criminal enterprise. Substantive justice, well, that involves the concept of just desserts, or how one determines fair punishment. And now, rule utilitarianism. Well, rule utilitarianism, one charges that action by the president it sets, or precedent it sets, and the long-term utility of the rule set by that action. Police perception of their role as crime fighters will lead to certain decisions in their use of deception and coercion. Two different law enforcement missions, crime fighting and public service, have quite different implications for individual decision making and policy formation. And then when you think about it, when referring to the warrior model, it's important to remember that the warrior model is the view that police officers are in a war against criminals. Now, the guardian model sees the officer as primarily a protector of the sensory, but also as the embodiment of democratic values. Persuasion. Persuasion is the use of signs, symbols, words, and arguments to induce compliance. Racial profiling. Well, racial profiling occurs when a police officer makes a stop based entirely on race or ethnicity. And then let's talk about this. The prevalent misperception of the popularity of a belief among a group because of the influence of a vocal minority is the definition of pluralistic ignorance. Pluralistic ignorance. And now that word, attorney-client privilege. Well, attorney-client privilege refers to the inability of authorities to compel an attorney through subpoena or through the threat of contempt to disclose confidential information regarding that attorney's client, his or her client. Under the retributive model, punishment is the sole goal. Okay, so that is it. That's all I've got for the review. I hope it's helped you out quite a bit. I wanted to tell you it has been a joy to work with you, even though you rarely hear from me because it's an online class and you don't want to be bothered. But I hope that this information helps you, get you prepared for the final exam. Want to tell you again, I'm blessed to have been able to work with you. I want you to do well on your final. An online class. Whoa. You're about to graduate, I believe. And so I'm going to tell you this. Have a great summer. And I wish you the best in your future endeavors.